Jamie, you know what I miss?
What do you miss, Chris?
With everything happening at the federal level, we haven't talked about Oklahoma in ages. We should do something about that.
Well, let's do something about that. Because you know what, Chris? Do I have a case for you today?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, today's case comes out of, you guessed it, Oklahoma. Yeah, this case deals with Oklahoma, school libraries, allegations of sexualized material, and a state superintendent determined to enforce new rules about what students can and can't read.
Oh, we are so back.
Oh, we're back, baby. This one's not just about book bans, though. It's about who gets to decide what belongs in a public school library. Is it the State Board of Education or local school districts? And when the state tried to enforce its new rule against a district, the district went straight to the Oklahoma Supreme Court and said, "You can't handle the truth." No, they said, "You can't do that." And so this, ladies and gentlemen, is the case of Edmond Public Schools versus the Oklahoma State Board of Education. Welcome to Chalk and Gavel, where we explore how the law shapes education one case at a time. I'm Jamie Cudlitz. I'm a former middle school math teacher and principal.
And I'm Chris Thomas. I've been a high school English teacher and a school attorney. Now we're both professors of educational leadership, bringing you the fascinating stories connecting the courtroom to the classroom.
Chalk and Gavel is for educational purposes only. While Chris and Jamie always try to provide accurate information, the law is like what I'm willing to eat. It's always changing. This podcast is not legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship, but they promised me it would be a lot of fun. For you. Can I get my candy now?
All right. Welcome back to Chalk and Gavel, everybody, or as our, transcription service often refers to it, Chuck and Gravel, or Talking Cattle was the latest one.
That one's my favorite.
I was just like,
maybe Chalk and Gavel is just too hard to say.
I guess, or maybe we're just so bad at this.
Yeah. We're a little pot committed, though. I think we got to stick with it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Chris, what have you got for the bell ringer today?
Yeah, so I know I just joked about doing too much federal stuff, but our bell ringer today comes from the still existent U.S. Department of Education.
Hey.
Yeah.
All right.
So earlier this month, on February 5th, this month when we're recording this, the U.S. Department of Education issued guidance on constitutionally protected prayer in public schools.
What?
Yeah. So given everything happening politically, you might expect this to be a dramatic shift, but it's actually pretty restrained. Like it honestly doesn't shake the boat all that much. So the guidance reaffirms two core principles. Schools can't sponsor or coerce prayer. But on the other hand, they also may not suppress private religious expression. So that's the balance that we've talked about a lot. Between the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. That was right. Kennedy versus Bremerton, all of that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So, we talked about this with Richard Katsky. Basically, schools should treat religious expression no worse and no better than it treats other forms of expression. You can't single it out, but also, it doesn't necessarily get additional protections, any more than any other kind of speech.
Yeah. Okay.
So students can pray individually or in groups. Teachers can engage in visible prayer so long as they're not speaking on behalf of the school. Schools can treat religious speech, they can't treat it worse than secular speech.
Okay.
So nothing revolutionary here.
Right.
Just a restatement of Supreme Court doctrine, but there is a strong emphasis, of course, on religious accommodation and parental rights because, that's just the direction that the law is going recently.
So it's basically like, we're going to say the same thing that we've been saying for years, but we're going to put an extra emphasis on the piece of it where, with the parental rights and exactly. Okay. We're just going to,
and on the ability to for teachers to pray too. So like that's a piece of it that's in here too. And a lot of that comes through, not necessarily in the statement of the law, but in their examples. So they provide some concrete examples, which I think are really telling.
Okay.
It's also interesting because like these examples don't all cut the direction I would expect them to cut.
Okay.
So the first one actually addresses, quote, religious expression in assignments. So this is similar to one of the issues we dealt with in Evans versus Hawes in episode 35, where the student said like, hey, I can't deliver that monologue because it violates my religion. But the guidance here says that, teachers can't reward or penalize work just because it's religious or, religious in nature, religious content, whatever it is. But they can evaluate it using ordinary academic standards of substance, relevance, and legitimate pedagogical concerns.
Okay.
So, in other words, like you can't discriminate against religion in assignments, but it's not a free pass either. So if you're a science teacher, and you're doing your evolution unit and someone, writes on the paper that says like, the world was created in 7 days, Darwin is,
an idiot. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like the teacher, like, can grade that based on, legitimate pedagogical concerns about like, hey, this is the thing I was teaching you, not necessarily the thing I want you to believe.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not about beliefs. This is about.
Right. And so that I think is a really interesting thing because, there's been some high profile situations in colleges and universities recently about like students submitting like, let's say religiously informed papers and, not getting good grades because they didn't, align with the expectations of the assignment and all that stuff.
Right.
So this guidance seemed to be saying that like, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Another interesting example, and this is like straight out of Kennedy versus Bremerton, is that it includes an example of a teacher and it says they may bow their head to say grace before lunch and students may join them. But they can't instruct students to pray, they can't pressure students to join in, and they can't create an environment where participation is favored.
Well, that just sounds like that's the way it's always been. Or not always, but like for a long time.
Right. Well, it's in a lot of ways, it's kind of a course correct from like people who are being too cautious of the Establishment Clause concerns, right?
Right.
And so like, it's basically
like that
Kennedy.
makes sense.
Yeah. I think so. So, there's like the question of like, when is it pursuant to your official duty, right? Like, do you have a second to like do what you want to do on your own time sort of thing? Right. And there's also the coercive pressure, right? So like we've talked about all of that.
Yeah.
And then the last example that it gives is this connection between religious expression and harassment. So the guidance says that schools have to protect students from targeted harassment, even if the harasser claims a religious basis. And then on the flip side of that, it says at the same time, schools have to distinguish between protected expression of religious beliefs and conduct that crosses the line into threats, targeted harassment, or, advocacy of violence. So that it's another really interesting thing where like, hey, religion isn't necessarily like a license to discriminate or to harass or bully or whatever it might be.
Okay.
But, you have to allow religious expression, but there's going to be situations potentially where that doesn't justify the effects on particular students. So like, again, it's a much more balanced approach than you might have expected from the current administration.
Yeah, it does feel rather balanced, which is nice and refreshing.
It is. Yeah.
I'll take it.
The last things I'll say about this that I think is really interesting is the last paragraph ends with the line, the Constitution does not enforce itself. Oh. And I just thought that was a really cool line, like a really powerful reminder that like, hey, just because these words on a page are 200 years old and, they're on this document, like that doesn't mean anything until like we give it meaning. So like it's this navigation that we all do to like basically give the Constitution meaning, through its enforcement, through how we interpret it, all of that stuff. So I just thought that was a kind of an empowering sentiment.
Nice. I said something similar the other night. It was more like that cake is not going to eat itself.
Same idea.
So it's a little different, but it's in the ballpark, right? Sorry. Okay. Thanks for that bell ringer, Chris. Let's get into today's case. So you said, Chris, it's been a while since we've talked about Oklahoma.
Weeks, months even.
Yeah, that's a long time in Chalk and Gavel world, in Talking Cattle world. We covered the Oklahoma Religious Charter School case in episodes 23 and 44. And so, since we do one every 20 or so episodes, it sounds like we're due.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
That's right. You do the English stuff. I do the math stuff. Anyway,
It works out.
so the charter school case, just to remind everybody, that's the one where the Oklahoma Supreme Court blocked what would have been the nation's first religious charter school. An equally divided Supreme Court upheld that decision. All right. And that was the one because Amy Coney Barrett recused herself. So
So it split 4-4.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So the next time one of those cases comes along, it might not. Anyway.
If there is a next time.
If there is a next time. So Oklahoma has also been featured rather often, I would say, in our bell ringers on this show.
It's probably got a disproportionate amount of bell ringers.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think they've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting in this country.
In many between
ways.
Oklahoma, Florida, and Texas, we've had a lot to talk about.
Exactly. So some of those bell ringers were about the efforts to control what schools could teach, what they could have in their library, inappropriate materials, that stuff. And we've been seeing that trend all over the country. And so that's why we like to talk about it on these bell ringers. So the state taking action to prevent students from being exposed to inappropriate material often takes the form of, well, that material is sexual in nature, right? Or it tends to include material that has representations of LGBTQ identities and things like that.
Yeah, that language of inappropriateness, like
is
inappropriate
often
material
tied.
of sexual nature, like typically meant identities that weren't like, heteronormative, right? Like that were outside of that, those expectations. And so it was in some ways like veiled language to tamp down on LGBTQ inclusive curriculum.
Yeah. So, those cases are going on all over the country. Those kinds of issues are being wrestled with. And guess what? We've got a case today out of the Oklahoma Supreme Court on that subject exactly.
Nice.
So,
another Oklahoma Supreme Court case.
Yes, exactly. So this story begins in 2023 when Oklahoma's state superintendent at the time, Ryan Walters.
That's a name I know I've heard before.
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. Ring a bell, huh?
One of his big pushes was to put Bibles in every Oklahoma school, wasn't it?
One of many.
Yeah,
pushes,
I think that was a bell ringer.
Yes, I think so. So anyway, 2023, he's not the superintendent anymore, but at the time he was, and he, along with the State Board of Education, proposed new rules for school library media programs. Okay? The rules included prohibitions on pornographic and sexualized content for books and other media.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Age appropriateness and all that.
Exactly. I too would not like pornography in the libraries. So when rules are proposed, sometimes we have what is known as a notice and comment period. All right. I'm sure on this one, that was probably a lot of fun.
I can imagine some of the comments they got. Yeah,
exactly. So anyway, March 2023, the board adopts the rules. Okay. Now this is where things get interesting, sir. In April of 2023, the Oklahoma Attorney General, Gentner Drummond.
Hey,
another name we've heard
Gentner.
Before. Yes. He issued an Attorney General opinion that said that the authority the board relied on to issue the rule was invalid. Okay?
Oh.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about Drummond before. He was the one who brought up the lawsuit regarding the religious charter school.
Right.
So I think it's pretty clear at this point that there's probably some differences of opinion between Mr. Walters and Mr. Drummond.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. And what's interesting, though, is they're both Republicans.
Republican. Yep.
Right? But Drummond is the one who said, hey, we can't actually have a religious charter school.
Yeah, that kind of goes
against I think Walters
the Constitution.
Pushed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another ideological struggle here
Yeah.
in many ways, it's also a power struggle because like Walters is claiming a lot more authority here than
Drummond thinks he has.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the Attorney General's opinion said that the proposed rules were not based upon a specific grant of legislative authority. What on earth does that mean, Chris?
Right.
Let's tell our listeners.
Yeah. So the State Board of Education is an executive agency. And in order to make rules that are binding and have the force of law, they have to go through a certain procedure. And they can only make rules based on the authority that the state has given them. And so that means the state legislature.
Yeah.
And so when an agency makes a rule, it has to have some statutory authority that allows it to do so.
So it basically prevents some random person or a random organization or subsidiary or whatever from saying, we can do whatever we want. No, you don't have the power to do whatever you want.
Right. Yeah. You only have the power given to you by the state.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, here it's basically the AG saying, hey, you didn't have or I don't think you have the power to do what you are trying to do.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's what that's about. Undeterred by the AG's determination that they apparently did not have the authority to do what they were doing, the board said, whatever, screw it.
Huh?
No, not officially. They didn't officially say that as far as I know.
I reject your authority.
And I substitute my own. So the board continued to push to have the state legislature approve the rules and make them permanent rules for the Department of Education. And that's all a part of the process in Oklahoma for agency rulemaking. We're going to make some rules and then you approve them.
Right. Yeah. So once the agency, and this is my understanding of Oklahoma's, and I'm not an Oklahoma attorney, obviously. Once the agency adopts the rule, they send it to the legislature, and the legislature has a chance to either approve it, disapprove it, or not say anything.
Yeah.
And as long as the legislator doesn't disapprove it, then the governor can say, okay, it's a rule now.
Well, that's what happened here.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. The state board adopted the rule, sent it to the legislature. The legislature punted, said, we're not going to do anything about this.
Huh?
And then so the governor stepped in and said, well, they didn't say no, so I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how a rule becomes a law, at least in Oklahoma.
Are you going to sing the song?
Yeah. I'm just a bill.
Yeah.
So now we've got this fresh new rule that prohibits pornography and sexualized content in school libraries. Then what? A rule, after all, like we've talked about before, is only as good as its enforcement, right?
Huh.
Yeah, because laws don't enforce themselves, just like that cake didn't eat itself. So in early 2024, the State Department of Education sent a letter to Edmond Public Schools. The letter stated that 2 specific books in one of their school libraries violated these new rules, and they recommended removing the books. Specifically, the letter challenged the inclusion of The Glass Castle and The Kite Runner in a high school library. Okay. Now, both of those books do have some, from what I understand, those books do have some descriptions of sexual assault, but both are kind of highly regarded and often included in many high school libraries and curriculum. I don't know, Chris, like as an English teacher, do you know those books?
I do. I've read both of those. I think I taught The Glass Castle to my seniors at one point. We were doing a nonfiction autobiography kind of section, and they really liked Glass Castle. Like it's very accessible. It's a really fascinating story about this woman's life. Kite Runner, that's one that shows up a lot on AP English lists for books to So these are well-regarded books that I would not be surprised to find in a high school library.
And are there often and included in these curricula for legitimate pedagogical kinds of reasons, right? Like they're not there to, say, hey, you want to talk about sex?
And they're not they include those things, but they're not about those things.
Gotcha.
Right? Like,
Yeah. All right. So the district gets this letter, and that says, take these books out of the library or else. Yeah, in letter form. So
what if we could just write that? That doesn't feel very lawyerly, right?
No, I know that's not. So the or else here in this case is essentially risking their accreditation status. Okay, so if they're found to be in violation of these rules or whatever, and they don't take corrective action, the State Board of Education could step in, and that could result in additional state oversight and some interventions, reputational consequences, things like that.
Right.
So
it's a big deal. Yeah.
It's a big deal. So what do you think the district did?
I mean, it's only 2 books, so they probably just like, yeah, whatever. Go along to get along, right?
Yeah. They say, yeah, are you sure? You really want to do this?
But we like
you know
these
what?
books.
Let's have some due process here. Let's get
I
a
do
hearing.
love due process.
Yeah. Let's talk about this. Let's try to figure this out. Let's break this down. I think you have an opinion. We also have an opinion. Let's share those opinions and see who wins.
Yeah. That sounds very mature.
Yeah. Yeah. So they asked for a formal hearing before the state board to appeal whether the books should be removed.
Okay.
So everybody went home happy?
No.
No, because there's more.
There's always
more. There's always more. So 2 days before the hearing, the Edmond Public Schools says, you know what? Never mind. We don't want your hearing. We're just going to file a lawsuit instead.
Well, that escalated quickly.
It sure did. And then they did. They filed a lawsuit. But before we talk about the lawsuit, we have some statements from Walters and the district's superintendent about the lawsuit that I think make very clear the political struggle going on within this legal drama in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
All right. So here is the district superintendent announcing the lawsuit at a press conference.
The State Department has ordered EPS to remove books from our libraries, which is not within their authority. Library books are highly protected. They are protected materials. The district has a long-standing policy for review of the materials in our libraries. Federal court decisions have also said a superintendent nor the school board can unilaterally remove books from public school libraries. So EPS is in a catch-22 situation. If we remove the books, we would be going against our own policy and federal court decisions. We would also be following rules that we believe are unlawful. If we do not remove the books, the State Department of Education has asked us to appear before the State Board of Education this Thursday to defend that decision. The State Department is also threatening the district with accreditation if we do not remove these books. Accreditation is vital to a school district for many reasons, and it's something that we must protect.
Yeah. So, it's interesting how the superintendent frames it about like, this is about authority, right? This isn't about these 2 books.
Right.
It is about, does the state have the authority to do what it is saying it can do here?
Right.
Because choosing those books, that's our job.
That's our job.
We've got a policy for that.
Yeah. And now you're putting us in between a rock and a hard place here, where you're telling us to do something that technically violates our authority, violates our policies. And if we don't do it, you're going to strip us of our accreditation,
right?
And this and that, right?
Right. And I really like how they frame that, right? Because like this rock and a hard place metaphor, they're basically saying that the law doesn't let us do what you are saying the law requires us to do. And so they're using the law as like, as a sword and a shield here.
Yeah.
Where like, hey, I can't do what you're asking me to do. And I'm also going to use the law as a mechanism to prove it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Though I doubt Ryan Walters sees things the same way.
Let's hear what he says.
Yeah, I would love to hear his response to this lawsuit.
Okay.
The other situation I wanted to address this morning is situation in Edmond. We have a legal challenge by the Edmond Public Schools. And I want to be really clear, Edmond is trying to make it about these 2 books. That's not the issue at hand.
Well, I thought they made it about the
Edmond
law.
Public Schools on
Right, they made it
ensuring
about
that
his
certain
authority.
books were in the hands of age-appropriate kids in the school. And that district decided to sue us on the entirety of our rules that ban pornographic material and sexually explicit material to minors. So just to be clear, what they want is for the board to have no authority to pull books out like Genderqueer and Flamer from the classroom that we started doing about a year ago when we started putting pressure on some of the districts to do that. So to be clear, they want access to these books, to these materials statewide. We're never going to back down to those pressures. We're going to continue to make sure that our kids are receiving a good education and that the type of materials that we've seen that are incredibly sexually graphic and pornographic are not in the hands of kids. So we will continue to update you. This is obviously very fluid. It's we're talking about just a couple days ago that we had that extended on to the Supreme Court. So there's a hearing set. I want to keep you guys up to speed, but I want to be really clear that that's what's at stake here.
Interesting. So the two examples that he used both involved LGBTQ inclusive characters, right? And so like there's that like selective interpretation of what is sexually inappropriate, right? Like, you know, there's this conflation here between like sexually inappropriate and LGBTQ identities and pornography, and like it all is getting like tossed together in this kind of virtue signaling.
Right.
But it's interesting how Walters frames this. It's like they are fighting to include pornography statewide.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think that's what they're doing.
No, they're talking about these two books that they feel like, you know, obviously they feel like they should have the authority to determine what has pedagogical or literary value or whatever.
Right.
And they're just, and that's all that they're saying is like, well, I don't think you have the authority to tell us what to do here. And I think in most cases, that is generally the case across the country, is who has the ability to determine what materials are in your classrooms. It's the state boards of it's the individual district board education board.
Right. Within the structures provided by the state, right?
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Yeah. So the state usually sets the standards, but it doesn't usually dictate curriculum.
No, exactly.
Curriculum is decided at the local level.
Yeah. Except if you're Ryan Walters and you're saying everybody needs to teach.
Unless
the Bible.
you're exerting more authority than maybe you have.
Yeah. Well, okay. So this ended up as a lawsuit, and what happened?
Well, the Supreme Court of Oklahoma took it up. They exercised original jurisdiction, which is 2 cases in a row, I think, where the Supreme Court has taken up a case without a lower court decision, just because of how significant this issue is.
Yeah.
And so the school district is basically saying, like, you, the State Board of Education, don't have the authority to enact this rule. So the rule is invalid, full stop. You can't enforce it against us.
Okay.
So the Supreme Court takes this up, and in a unanimous decision, they side with the school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the court starts by looking at what does state law say about who has control over school libraries.
Okay.
Spoiler alert, it's not the State Board of Education. So Oklahoma state law says that school district boards of education have the power to maintain and operate a complete public school system best suited to the needs of their school district.
Okay.
And they have the authority to purchase, construct or rent, operate, maintain classrooms, libraries, auditoriums, and so on for the operation of public schools. So
that sounds pretty straightforward to me.
It does. So Oklahoma law says local school boards have the authority to maintain and operate libraries as they deem best suited to the needs of the school district.
Okay. So the school district's looking pretty good so far, huh?
Looking pretty good. But wait, there's more. There's another statute. You see, I get to do it too. There's another statute in the school code that says, quote, as school library media center resources are finite, the library media program shall be reflective of the community standards for the population the library media center serves when acquiring age-appropriate collection to meet the needs of students in all areas of the school library media program.
Okay.
So we've already got an age-appropriate thing, and it's basically telling local school libraries, like, hey, consider your population and your needs when you buy materials.
So it's basically saying, well, there's 2 parts to this. The first part is you, local school board, you have the authority to determine what's in there. And the second piece is, we're kind of already, we kind of already have this rule in place that kind of covers what your new rule is trying to do.
Right.
So
right. And
it's not really, we don't even need it.
you would think that.
Oh, I would.
But
I did.
the State Board of Education would disagree.
Oh.
Because they're relying on a slightly more broad grant of authority. Oklahoma state law provides that the State Board of Education has the authority to, quote, promulgate rules governing the classification, inspection, supervision, and accreditation of all public elementary and secondary schools. And so notice it doesn't mention libraries, right? But the state board is essentially arguing that because they have this general supervisory authority over schools, they can regulate everything that goes on in schools.
Huh.
So that's a massively broad understanding of the scope of their authority, right?
Yeah. Just because you have a kind of a supervisory role, they're claiming that, no, we can get into the weeds. We're not just supervising, but if we supervise and see something we don't like, then we can go in there and mess with everything.
Right. Exactly. And the Oklahoma Supreme Court says maybe not, because, first, a general provision usually gives way to a more specific provision. Like that's just kind of a normal canon of statutory interpretation.
Okay.
So like if you've got something that's directly on point, then, and it conflicts with something that's a little bit broader, maybe potentially, you just go with the specific one because the people who wrote the specific one were dealing with something that they knew they were dealing with, whereas the general one, who knows what they thought they were dealing with. So specific wins out over general.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And also here, the Oklahoma Supreme Court says that there's a clear preference here for local control of schools and their curriculum and what's in the library. Like that's what those two laws that I read articulate. Like it's this idea that we want local decisions to be made locally based on, their understanding of the needs of the community and based on community input, right? So decisions are most closely made by those who are affected by them.
Yes.
And here, because the state is basically trying to control local decision making, that violates this idea of local control. And the court says, you know what? There's nothing in state law that authorizes you, State Board of Education, to override a local school board's exercise of discretion in applying its community standards to determine what books go in the library. So you, school board, did not have the authority that you said you did.
Wow.
We agree with, another branch of the Oklahoma political process with Gettner Drummond. And so
he's batting 2 for 2, Mr. Drummond, huh?
Of the cases
chalk and Gavel
that we've covered.
Cases,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Good job, Mr. Drummond.
That's interesting. Listen, that's a long-standing sort of tradition in this country of the idea of local control over schools.
Right.
And that's something that, that like I say it to my classes all the time. Like, you want to influence what's happening in your schools. It's not about which governor you vote for. It's not even about your state superintendent of schools. It's who's on that local school board.
Right.
Like, that's it.
Yeah. That's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
And what's so fascinating about all of this happening in Oklahoma is like, these are both Republicans.
Yeah.
And so Republicans have historically championed local control and like really been behind this idea that like educational decisions should be made as locally as possible.
Right.
But that conflicts with another kind of strand of conservative politics right now, which is this idea of like, kind of policing morality around sex and sexual orientation.
Right.
And so, we've got, these two different strands of conservatism that are really kind of in conflict here, where like, hey, we want to use the state to impose a view of what's appropriate for kiddos. And another side of conservatism saying like, hey, stay in your lane.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. It's very interesting. And you know what? Like, I kind of like the stay in your lane kind of approach, just because if you don't, at least as far as these cases are concerned, you're really getting into some highly subjective kinds of materials. Right. And, there was somebody I spoke to a while ago. He said something that, has resonated with me over the over the years, and I say it a lot now, is good law makes good policy, right? And theoretically, if you've got good laws, it can kind of take care of those kinds of, it can account for those kinds of subjectivities and things like that. And that's why I get a little bit more worried about people circumventing the law or trying to use the law to impose.
Make unilateral rules for everyone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When the law ideally is set up to allow people to hopefully make the rules that make the most sense for themselves, as long as they follow certain basic broad guidelines, non-discrimination kinds of things, and there's lots of parameters. But like when you start to get down into the weeds, having the laws that protect those kinds of subjectivities is important.
Yeah, it's a benefit, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And especially when you've got a state board of education, like going in and picking literal, like 2 books out of an entire library collection for one school in like the state, right? Like, that's such the definition of micromanaging.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, the other takeaway that I've got for this case is just the courage of this school district. Like, this is, this entire fight is about 2 books, right? Like, of however many thousands they have in their school library.
Right.
And rather than just saying like, yeah, no, we'll take them out. They're like, no, we're going to take this one to the mat. Like,
but that reinforces the thing that we have talked about on this show all the time is know your laws, know your policies. And the more legally literate you are, the more empowered you can be to act within and through the law.
Right. Exactly.
And that's what they did.
Example. Yeah. And it's another example of like, the laws don't enforce themselves. Right. Like, so this rule that they did was unlawful according to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. And no one was going to enforce that unlawfulness unless a school district like this stood up.
Exactly. And if they had just kind of rolled over, then something that was illegal was going to continue to happen.
Right. Which would have a chilling effect and could exacerbate the whole issue. Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting case.
It is. I like it. And you know what? If this is coming out, is this the one coming out at South by Southwest?
I think so.
Oh, well, great. If you're listening to it and you're at South by Southwest, we're gonna talk about this on Thursday at our live recording. Thursday,
come check us out.
The 12th. Yeah, we're going to talk about book bans. We're going to talk about censorship, religion, all these things that are really important issues that our schools are wrestling with right now. We're going to talk about it at South by Southwest. So come see us. And if you're not at South by Southwest EDU, we hope that you are enjoying listening to this episode wherever you are.
Right. Yeah. Because your homework is this podcast is not going to like itself. So
you've been holding on to that one the whole show, huh?
No, it just came to me. So like, rate, review, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. It means the world to us. We're having fun doing this.
All right, everybody. Well, that does it for today. And we will see you again in 2 weeks. Have a good one.